Hey everyone, we just had an extraordinary lecture that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. A lot of interesting things. One question that we answer is how come the great sages end up having children that are also great sages when we know that Torah is not something that you could inherit. You could only acquire it through toil. At the same token, reincarnation, is it something that affects your day-to-day life? Well, it does a lot more than you know. At the same token, there are people like Louis Farrakhan that tell his victims or his followers that they are the victims of society. They're criminals, they're losers, they're drug addicts, they're rapists, and all types of other crimes that he says about them, his own followers, because of society, because of Hollywood, because of the Jewish people. Is there any truth to that, or is it really just all your fault? Is it my fault? Whose fault is it? We're going to answer that too. We're going to answer the lies, we're going to address the truth, learn it, acquire it, enjoy it, and make sure to share it. B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We're back here on our Tuesday night Shiur Torah. This series is about Jewish intimacy, the holiness of Jewish intimacy, as we've learned in the first 16 lectures by the teachings of the Ramban's Iggeret HaKodesh, written about 750 years ago. Intimacy can be a whole new world of its own that could allow a person to reach the highest level of holiness rather than the highest levels of impurity and animalistic behavior. So tonight's shiur, B'ezrat Hashem, is going to take us to the next stage, which I think is certainly going to enlighten quite a few people. Tonight's shiur is for the refuah shlema of Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Avi Mori David ben Nesriya, Imi Morati Doris bat Zora, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahis that continue to support us, continue to watch our lectures. Very much appreciated for everybody that's out there. Also to remind you, the Tikkun Abrit, the time frame as far as the Tikkun Shovavim ends this week. This is the most auspicious time for a person to do tshuva, to do the repentance, for any immorality sins that they've made in their life, whether it be homosexuality, wasting seed, adultery, and so on and so forth. This is the time to do the tikkunim. Anyone that wants to learn more about it, go to the website tikkunabrit.live. tikkunabrit.live. It'll be on the screen, B'ezrat Hashem, when you see this tomorrow. But also on the description, you'll see that the website to go to and learn more about how to do tikkunim. Again, there are many different things that the Torah teaches. One of the most critical parts of elevating yourself to be a servant of Hashem, to be a servant of the one and only God of Israel, is to purify yourself by removing all of the sins, which is the most first and foremost important thing, is to stop the sins. After that, after stopping the sins, a person can elevate themselves further by helping other people do tshuva, doing what's called tikkunim, and so on and so forth. Of course, none of this is possible without learning Torah on a regular basis. Now, when it comes to intimacy, and what we've learned already in the first 16 lectures of this extraordinary series, we've learned all different aspects of the Torah. We've learned some of the basics from the Chumash. We've learned some of the additional behind the scenes from the Midrash and the Gemara. We've even delved into some very high level Kabbalah from the Zohar Kadosh and other Sfarim of the Kedoshim. Tonight is going to be a mix of all of that, but it's going to be something that, although some of you may not feel that this is necessarily relevant to you, it is still going to be intellectually stimulating at the very least, and I think even elevating on a spiritual level for those of you that like to do kiruv and want to help other people do tshuva and improve their lives. Because one of the things that I think we could all agree on is that the immorality in the world has gone to such a point where people have lost their senses of right or wrong. You know, instead of hiding some of their defects, some of their immoral, lustful desires, strange behaviors. People actually celebrate it. As this one guy today desecrated the name of God in one of the worst possible ways by simply telling people that although he claims to be religious, has a rabbi for a father, grew up in a very religious home, he's one of the political figures in Israel. This young man named Yair Sharki announced that he loves boys and he loves God, meaning that he's religious but also homosexual at the same time. Of course, the two contradict each other, they're antithetical to each other, but needless to say, this person decided that he needs to make this LGBTQ announcement to the world, as many other people are doing in recent years, where for whatever reason or another, it's not only something that it's not something new. Homosexuality is not a new thing. It's something that existed since the time of Noach, and of course we know what the Torah says about it. But the key is that what we've seen as far as the human psychology change in recent years is that while in the past this type of behavior was hidden, this type of behavior was something that people simply kept to themselves, kept to their own privacy, whatever they desired or didn't desire, they kept to themselves. In today's world, we see people actually celebrate it, and in fact, trying as hard as possible to turn this into the normalcy, the new normalcy of the world, where this is celebrated. And it's relatively strange, because if I were to tell you that I have a, let's say, I don't know, and I don't, I'm just giving you an example instead of you, I have a fetish to eat cockroaches. Okay, now if I made an announcement, breaking news, Rabbi Yaron Reuven likes to eat cockroaches. Now, anyone out there that would celebrate and say, high five to you, Rabbi, you're the best, we love cockroaches too, or even if we don't, good for you for announcing it. Now, you would be declaring yourself a mentally sick person. Why? Because just because I have some type of defect in my mind and I decide that I have a fetish for cockroaches or to looking at people's toes or just deciding to walk aimlessly in the same in the same room in a circle until I find a corner. I mean, just because I have a mental defect doesn't necessarily mean that you need to celebrate with me. By celebrating with me, by saying that, oh, this is great, good for you, you're in essence telling me that you're also mentally sick. Now, this, unfortunately, is understood when I speak. I'm sure that even the people that cannot stand me understand everything I just said. But yet, in the world today, we have people declaring what they do in their private homes and whatever they decide to do in their own privacy, and they feel the need to announce this to the world. And instead of the world frowning upon this and saying, listen, why do I care that you like to eat cockroaches? I don't care about cockroaches. Why do I care that you like to look at toes? I don't care about toes. Why do I care that you like to walk around in a round room looking for a corner? Beat yourself up for all I care. I don't care. Why do I care? Why do you need to make a press release letting the world know that you're crazy? And you even expect us to give you a high five? Why? Now, this is understood, well understood, by everyone that's watching this now or forever. But yet today, we have made this a new normal where anytime somebody likes to eat cockroaches or any other strange behavior that's against humanity, they make an announcement and the public applauds them, welcomes them, celebrates them, and literally reinvigorates people's dead careers that have been dead for a decade or more just because of their newfound fetish that is completely against humanity. Now, this is what the new normal is. And the hope that we have today is that we try to go back to our roots. We try to go back to what our holy sages have taught us. We try to go back to what our Creator has taught us. And how do we distinguish ourselves from this new normal? Because even though we may not all reach the highest levels of holiness, we certainly cannot stay the same and expect the world to see that there's a difference between us and the people that are, in essence, so strange. We have to make as much of an effort to separate ourselves from this new form of normal, from this newfound lefty, liberal, LGBTQ mentality, and try to, at the very least, distinguish ourselves by elevating our own private information without necessarily declaring ourselves having a preference to eat cockroaches or going around rooms, having a preference over white toes versus black toes. None of that stuff actually matters, but simply elevating ourselves in such a fashion where we are learning about a topic that we can actually apply to our lives in our own privacy, in our own way of connecting to our Creator. Now, this, Rabotai, is the goal of every single one of our lectures, but particularly this series of Jewish intimacy is one that has found many Jewish homes and even non-Jewish homes completely surprised at how amazing our holy Torah is, how extraordinary it is, how open it is as far as the endless amount of information that is very much necessary for every single household out there to apply to their lives in whatever capacity that they can. Certainly there are some people that can do more than others. Certainly there are some people that are willing to do more than others. But needless to say, if a person is just simply going to, live in this world, driving on neutral, thinking that this new deranged version of normal is not going to affect them and their kids, you have a surprise coming to you. The key is to understand what the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin in Perek Chelek says, that at the end of days, before Mashiach comes, there are going to be many strange things. The despicable behavior. Despicable behavior is what's going to be celebrated. The generation is going to be a generation where they're going to have chutzpah kekelev. They're going to have the type of attitude like a unshamed, unabashed dog. All types of very strange things, because if we look at some of the stories and even the pictures of our forefathers or even our grandparents, things that you can see even with your own eyes, you see how modest people were, you see how reserved people were. Even if they acted deviant with deviant ways, they typically did it in their privacy of their homes or some other way. They weren't so open about these things. And one of the things that I think everyone could truly appreciate from the series is that it's not the typical approach that is scared to mention certain things, tiptoeing around the eggshells, perhaps trying to walk in between the raindrops. No, we're not holding any bars. We're disclosing everything. We're letting you know this is the information where, regardless of what level you're in, whether you're a newbie to Torah, you've already learned Torah for at least a decade or more, you're a Talmid Chacham, you're a rabbi, you're a male, female, whatever it is, the information is being served to you literally on a silver platter for you to take, for you to consume. Archev picha v'amaleu, says Hashem. Open your mouth and I will fill it with whatever Torah that you want. We're giving you the information on a silver platter so you can take it into your life and see which part of it can you apply now, which part of it can you perhaps apply later on down the road. But the key is to at least have the information that shows us that yes, there is a way for us to achieve holiness, just like Hashem obligated us to do. In Parashat Kedoshim, in the Torah, Hashem says, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. You be holy because I am holy. And there are multiple times in the Torah, including in last week's Parashat Yitro, where Hashem obligates us to do our very best to attain true holiness. And of course, Rashi explains to us holiness is what comes to how a person treats their intimacy. You will never find holiness in a place where there's perversion, where there's sexual deviance. You will never find holiness in places of immodesty. What you will find is holiness where there are guards up, where there are reservations, where people preserve themselves and are more modest and are more careful about their choices. So now all of this is simply the introduction to the introduction. Why? Because one of the things that we learned in a different series that we have called the Jewish Ideology, I believe it was last week or the week before, is that the Chazon Ish that lived in the last century, he said something almost like in passing. I believe this was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. He said in his Sefer Emunat V'Bitachon that there are certain people that are simply born with a higher level of holiness, higher level of intellect, higher level of spiritual elevation. They're naturally more modest, naturally more humble, naturally holier. And typically they're born to a certain set of parents that also have these similar traits. And many times you see that the Gadolim HaDor, the giants of the generation in holiness and Torah, are also sons of the giants, of the holiest people of the world, of the people of the Torah. But at the same token, the Mishnah in Masechet Avot, in the 6th chapter, tells us that Torah is not something that's inherited. Unlike kinghood, unlike kehuna, priesthood, that is inherited, just because your father is a Kohen, you are a Kohen. Because your father is a descendant of King David, that means that you're going to be a descendant of King David. That's how kinghood works. That's how priesthood works. But Torah doesn't work that way. Torah works in such a fashion where if you want Torah, you have to acquire it yourself. You have to toil for it yourself. Where even if your father is the biggest rabbi in the world, the biggest genius, the biggest Ilui of the last couple of centuries, it literally has no impact on you whatsoever as far as your Torah knowledge. If you want to acquire it, you have to toil for it yourself. But yet at the same time, we see that there are children, generation after generation, for the last several thousand years, that are already born with these extraordinary character traits. These extraordinary character traits of humility. David HaMelech, wasn't just a regular boy in a regular family. His father, Ishai, was the Gadol HaDor, and the Gemara says, was one of 4 people that never sinned. And the only reason he died was because of the original sin at the time of Adam HaRishon. If it wasn't for that sin that decreed that all mankind has to die at some point, with few exceptions that Hashem made, which we'll discuss in a moment, everyone has to die. Ishai didn't make any sins, but he had to die because of the original sin. Meaning that David didn't just come from a regular set of parents. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't just come from a regular set of parents. His father, Amram, was the Gadol HaDor, was a giant among giants. And his mother was the daughter of one of the Shvatim. So you see that these people were not normal. They were extraordinarily holy, and they had holy kids. We see the same thing with Avraham having Yitzchak, Yitzchak having Yaakov, Yaakov having the Shvatim. We also see with Aaron HaKohen having 4 holy kids. Even Nadav and Avihu that were punished by Hashem. Still, the Gemara says they were extraordinarily holy people. We see that even in recent generations, one of the most spectacular examples of this is our own very dear Rav Ovadia. Ovadia Yosef, alav shalom, merited to have something that is, even in this world of holiness, is an exception of all exceptions, where all of his children ended up becoming Talmidei Chachamim. His son, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, is one of the Gadolie HaDor, the Rishon LeZion. His other son, Rav Yaakov Yosef, that passed away, he was literally supposed to be the next in line to be the Not just the Rishon LeZion, but he was a giant among giants in Torah. Literally, a person that learns a little bit about his life and some of the writings that he has, some of the Torah that he taught. Literally, you're wondering, wait, he lived 20 years ago? Not like 500 years ago? Not 1,000 years ago? And yeah. And each one of Rav Ovadiah's sons turned out to be a very holy person. So you see here that this is not just in the past, thousands of years ago, it's also recently. Rav Kanievsky, Alav Shalom, his father was the Steipler Gaon. Rav Kamenetsky, one of the Gadolim here in America, his father was one of the Gadolim, Rav Kamenetsky, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, of the previous generation, Alei Shor. So we see here that these extraordinarily holy people somehow transferred their character traits to the next generation. The Torah that their kids learned, certainly they learned on their own. You have to acquire that. But in order to have that zealousness for Torah, that commitment for Torah, the proper character traits that will allow you to become that perfect vessel to learn Torah, that apparently was gifted to them. Just like the Chazon Ish says, happens with some people. How does this happen? Now, in this week's parasha, Parashat Mishpatim, we see that one of the sources we've used in this series as the source of the mitzvah of intimacy between a man and his wife is in this week's parasha, where it talks about a man should not withhold food or clothing or marital relations from his wife, even if he chooses a second wife, meaning in those days where being married to multiple women was common, still a person had to know that if this additional wife was going to cause you to lower the amount of intimacy that your first wife required, then you weren't able to marry her. So we see that intimacy is not just something we do. We're not animals. It's actually part of the responsibilities and obligations of the Holy Torah itself. So since we all familiar with this, and at the same token, we all have seen these giants in Torah and holy people, how come we can't do that? How come we can't just get one of these holy Gadolie HaDor to just be born that way? And the answer is, we can. It requires just a little bit of knowledge and some effort, which Be'ezrat Hashem will learn today. Before we go into the Ramban and delve into how this is done, we first have to understand some prerequisite information about what is a soul. What is a soul? What is a Neshama? What is a Nefesh? Ruach? All of these different things that perhaps we've learned in a kuntres called Tikvat Shani, based on the extraordinary sefer by Rav Yosef Shani, Sheikh. He's the grandson of the Baal Ahavat Chaim, one of the Mekubalim from the previous generation, and Rav Shani himself, I've mentioned him in previous lectures. He's also one of the Mekubalim with some of the most extraordinary stories, real-life stories you could ever imagine. And he writes the following. In the first chapter, in a section called The Nature and Essence of the Soul, he says that the Jewish teachings that teach in regards to the soul, as far as the viewpoint of mankind, what we can learn from it, is that man, like all creation, was formed with four physical elements, four, in essence, types of energies: fire, air, water, and earth. However, this accounted only for man's corporal structure, his flesh, blood, and bones, What remained lacking was the life force, the spirit which activates the nervous system and derives all physiological functions through which man is transformed from a mere form to a living body which moves, talks, and behaves. At the time of creation, this force, known as the Nefesh, was injected into man through attachment to the purest component of his blood, a total of 87 grams. It is this Nefesh which activates his brain and converted him to a living human being. And to this very day, the genetic makeup of the human sperm encompasses the composite of the elements of fire, air, and water, where when sperm flows with force, these elements combine with the component of the soul which keeps them alive, preventing the sperm's demise and eliciting formation of the fetus. However, this cannot be accomplished without the fourth element, which is earth, which is necessary for creating a human body. And this element, earth, exists in the woman's egg, found in the follicle, and contains the hormone estrogen. When the male sperm and the female egg unite at a specific temperature, these four elements combine and direct the formation of a fetus. And it protects the embryo until it obtains the requisite 87 grams of blood, after which the Nefesh attaches to it with greater intensity, developing the fetus, infant, child, adult, and staying with them until death. Already we see the science behind the seed from the Torah perspective, exact weights, exact details. But now we're going to go further. The Nefesh contains spiritual organs and veins parallel to the physical body. Each spiritual organ is attached to its physical counterpart. Its functions similarly to an electrical current, generating energy for the entire body. And although the soul is located throughout the body, it has pivotal bases without which the body could not exist. Now, there are several such bases for various components and levels of the soul. The base for Nefesh is the liver. For Ruach is the heart. For the Neshama is the brain. So we see from here that different terms that are sometimes used interchangeably by average people, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, these are obviously all three different parts of what we would like to call soul. But in regards to really the soul itself has parts. So the Nefesh actually has a physical location. It's the liver. The Ruach has a physical location, which is the heart. And the Neshama has the brain. Now there are two other parts which we'll discuss momentarily that a person can attain, but here we see also that one thing is that this Nefesh, it's all over the entire body. It's not just in the liver. It's stationed there, but it has organs and veins, similar to how you sometimes see the graphics that are made on computers, showing the nervous system. This, in a spiritual sense, actually exists. And in fact, even when a person has, chas v'shalom, loses an arm, a leg, any type of body part, that part that's missing is only missing physically. It's not missing spiritually. Where when that person, passes away, goes up to Shamayim, that arm that was missing throughout his physical life is still there. Doesn't get affected. Now, when they're not connected to the physical body, the soul is capable of powerful sensations. Meaning that when your soul leaves your body, whether it's through a out-of-body experience, near-death experience, dreams, aliyat neshama, which is a person that through different Torah teachings can elevate their neshama, take it out of its body, and in so many words, put that neshama wherever he wants, wherever she wants. But again, there are holy ways to do certain things and there are impure ways to do certain things. If a person does these things in a holy way, then certainly there is a lot of gain that could be reached, attained by something like this. If a person does it in the other way, then the loss was already, from the start. Let's just say that. Now, when the Neshama, when the soul is not restricted by the body, it can perceive events that are taking place in any place in the world, thousands of miles away. Similar to its creator, like being omnipresent. It can be in multiple places at the same time. It may even sense futuristic events. The soul comprehends the essence of all spiritual states. The soul doesn't speak like we do. There is telepathy, type of communication. People that have discussed their near-death experiences many times, they were able to tell people things that their body did not see. When their soul left their body, traveled above the hospital, it saw all types of things, and then when it came back to life, it tells people, oh yeah, I saw that, such and such people were doing my surgery, and he wore this, and he wore that, and she had this shoes, and you guys were talking about this during the surgery, even though I was out. Still, my soul saw this. There's also somebody forgot their lunch or a pair of sneakers on the roof. There was an accident 400 miles away between a truck that's blue with a dent on the side and a small little vehicle, and so on and so forth. Like literally, the souls report to these people, when they come back to life, they report things that are, from all intents and purposes, physically impossible. So this is just a microcosm of the examples of what the soul's capabilities are. But the truth is that the soul can do a lot more than that, including seeing the future. Its union with the body imposes restrictions upon it in accordance with the physical limitations of the body. Now, this spiritual soul activates the body, is known as the Neshama. So we have the Nefesh, and then we have the Neshama. Now, due to its highly spiritual nature, it cannot be integrated with the physical elements just as water and fire do not merge. Rather, this neshama becomes enveloped in a thin body, comprised of the purest components of the human blood and the lowest part of the soul, relatively speaking. And this body is referred to as Nefesh, meaning that the Neshama goes within the Nefesh itself, if you will. And therefore, at times, the higher level of soul, the Neshama, is also referred to as Nefesh. This is why sometimes they're interchangeable as far as the terminology. As it says in the creation of Adam HaRishon in Genesis, he blew into his nostrils a Neshama of life, and man became a living Nefesh. Now this Nefesh is transformed into 5 spiritual components according to different levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechidah. And these 5 parts do not enter the person at once, but rather on a graduated sequence, and not necessarily everyone gets even the majority of them. Nefesh is the lowest spiritual level, which unites the greatest physical components of the body, the purest 87 grams of blood. The Nefesh is also present in every living creature, including plants and inanimate objects. This is in essence what gives people the physical form. This Nefesh is what integrates the electrons, protons, and neutrons in atoms, which are the basic particles of matter. Ruach, on the other hand, is the second level of the soul, which humans can acquire by elevating their character traits and exercising self-control over such mundane pleasures as excessive food, money, sex, etc. However, the body and Nefesh can exist without this level, without Ruach. And indeed, most human beings only possess a level of Nefesh. But anyone that does have the Ruach is certainly fortunate because they'll have an elevated soul that could comprehend things that others can't. But above the Ruach is the Neshama, which is only accessible to people who demonstrate even higher levels of self-control and holiness. And this level cannot be acquired without studying our holy Torah. And as the Neshama enters the body and unites with the Ruach and the Nefesh, it elevates the person to greater appreciation of the secrets of the universe, which are revealed to the Neshama while it's still united with the body. These integrations of the Neshama with Ruach and Ruach with Nefesh occur only when a person is sleeping. And this is the intent that's written in the book of Job. My Nefesh longs for you at night while the Ruach within me will be aroused. So here we see that some of the things we've been learning in the other series is about elevating our character traits, developing them, becoming better, and so on, has extraordinary impact on what type of soul level we attain. Where the more a person perfects their character traits, the more parts of their soul they're getting from above. Meaning that it's not too late for anyone, regardless of whether a person's young or old. They can attain more if they develop themselves, if they contain themselves from all of the perversions and things that are forbidden. They could certainly elevate themselves to be above a simple animal that just has a nefesh. They could even get to ruach. And if they elevate themselves to a level of holiness, like what we're discussing here in this series, hence the reason why it's called Iggeret HaKodesh, the letter of holiness, they could attain the Neshama. Now this Neshama is not the highest level. There's also a level called Chaya. And the Chaya is so holy and so elevated that it doesn't actually enter the body. Rather, it envelopes the body as a spiritual cover. The Kabbalists call this Or Makif. Anyone that's familiar with the aura and has seen some of the videos we've published in the past, or has seen the book, the Coming Revolution, or it's also called Science Comes of Age, that's part of our Kiruv package that we sent to many people around the world over the years, has pictures of different people, and it shows there's a special machine that gives a visual illustration of what their aura colors are, and you see that there's certain people that had a very unique aura colors that symbolize a very high level of holiness. This is in essence similar to what we're talking about, this Chaya. Not it quite, but again, this will give you some type of image to the words that I'm saying. And even above the Chaya, there's the Yechidah. Yechidah is the fifth highest level of the soul. Person that achieves this has achieved a state of enlightenment comparable to the level of Adam HaRishon. And such a person can never die, since death was decreed as a consequence of sin. Only a few people throughout all of history had this Chaya. Chanoch, the son of Yered. I know that the Christians like to call him Enoch, and they even believe that they have a book of Enoch, even though they've destroyed it and added a lot of different things that are not part of the tradition. Needless to say, this is not a book for Jews or anybody to read. It has a lot of issues with it. It's called the book of Chitzonim. But Chanoch is a real character that lived before Noach, and it says that even though at that time many people were living to be 900 years old, 950 years old, Hashem took Chanoch at a much younger age. He was 360, I think it was. So this kind of contradicts. How does a Chanoch never die and then he died? That's because he didn't die. Hashem took him and turned him into Malach Memtet. Because he reached such a high level that he attained the highest level of the Neshama and he couldn't die. So there was no purpose for him to be in the world anymore. Another person that achieved this was Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet. One of the reasons why Hashem chose Eliyahu Navi to be the one that will announce Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, Eliyahu Navi will come as much as 3 days before Mashiach, and some say even on the same day as Mashiach, to announce to the world that Mashiach is here. Meaning that without Eliyahu Navi announcing to the world that Mashiach is here, whoever says he's Mashiach is a fraud. Eliyahu Navi has to come. Now, why does Eliyahu Navi have to come, and what does it have to do with the fact that he never died? Because in order for a Mashiach to become a Mashiach, he has to have somebody make him Mashiach, put the special oil on him, which can only be done by a prophet. Now, we don't have prophecy in the world, so what can we do? Hashem made sure that already took care of it. What? He took Eliyahu Navi from this world, and Eliyahu Navi never died. And therefore, he can come back to the world whenever Hashem decides he wants him to go back into the world, and he can make Mashiach because the Mashiach was born a regular person. But to become Mashiach, he has that the special oil is put on him, and then he gets the superpowers, if you will, that will finish the job. But Eliyahu Navi was one of them. But interestingly enough, also we have Serach bat Asher, Serach the daughter of Asher, the granddaughter of Yaakov. She's also one of the 10 people that never died. So we see here also that this highest level of soul can also be attained by women. Now, the soul of an enlightened person is something that a person should at the very least aspire to acquire. Even if, obviously, they realize they're not going to become Eliyahu Navi, so long as they're normal, they realize they won't become Eliyahu Navi. Still, everyone knows that they can elevate themselves to be better. And I know that many of Baruch Hashem, the people that have been watching our lectures over the years, they contacted us and over the years, and they sometimes I didn't know who they were and never heard from them for 2, 3, 4 years. They're watching the lectures and doing everything that they possibly can, that they're learning. And then one day they contact us and they tell us, listen, my life is completely transformed. Where I was and where I am, you wouldn't even recognize it. And it's literally unbelievable stories, one after another. And these people didn't start off extremely holy. Many times they started the exact opposite. In the second chapter of Tikvat Shani, Rav Shani writes that people who avoid mundane social interaction and trivial pursuits can achieve some significant spiritual enlightenment. To such an extent that they can literally get to a point where they could have their past, their hidden past, revealed to them, or past of others. They can even get to a point of a small part of prophecy, of revealing the future. But again, all this through holiness, not through Ouija boards and tarot cards and all types of witchcraft, which this week's parasha says, Machshefa lo techayeh, someone that deals with witchcraft gets a death penalty. So witchcraft is not allowed. But there's a holy way to being able to see the future, the past. The higher level people can even reach an elevated soul even through song. This is actually one of the ways that David HaMelech used psalms, used Tehillim. He used song to reach the highest level of holiness. This is not like the craziness and ecstasy that people consume and supposedly feel when they go to nightclubs and do all types of drugs. No, we're talking about authentic ecstasy through holiness that can elevate the soul. Now, this type of elevation, which of course is preceded by a lot of character development, holiness as far as the intimacy, holiness in regards to their behavior on a day-to-day basis, Torah learning, and so on. But this higher level soul can get to a point of prophecy, nevuah, which is acquiring knowledge of what the Creator intends to do. Hashem gives you insights of what He wants to do with certain things, and even visions. And at times when a person is in a peaceful state of sleep and inner tranquility, his dreams will reveal events which are destined to materialize. This, I'm sure some of you that are watching have had little parts of this. You dreamt of something, you thought of something, and it happened. These are little tidbits, little sparks that Hashem sometimes hints to a person to give them the motivation, inspiration, idea. Go for it. Try for more. Get closer to me. Unfortunately, many times people take this the exact opposite way. They start thinking, oh, since I had this dream, maybe I'm already a prophet. Since I had this dream, maybe I'm already superior to mankind. People should bow to me. And they start turning themselves into Paro instead of turning themselves into someone holy. They become delusional. They think that they're the next Mashiach. Every week I get at least one person telling me he's Mashiach. Sometimes she. Apparently Mashiach can be female in some people's eyes. Anyway, the people that have this elevated soul could literally do things that are very different. And the underlying basis for this process is that when the soul is in a relaxed state, it stimulates brain waves which transcend the present existence, and thereby revealing mysteries and personal secrets. And this is the meaning of the verse in the Torah. It says, through a dream will I speak to him. But this is not something that happens through normal sleep. It's a different type of sleep that the author calls it relaxed sleep. But sometimes these dreams, one of the reasons why Shlomo HaMelech says that most dreams are meaningless, is because sometimes dreams are inspired by different food that a person consumes and that creates certain gases and so on. But again, sometimes a person will have a dream that will have not only meaning but also even a prediction. There's a woman, very holy woman that we know, that last week, Thursday night, she had a dream that a 6-year-old boy was going to be murdered by a terrorist. She was afraid to send our kids to school, but, you can't really take every one of these dreams seriously, or else it'll drive you crazy. Our kids went to school, and Baruch Hashem, they came back. But unfortunately for anyone who follows up what's going on in Israel, knows that there was a terrorist attack where a couple of young boys were murdered by this evil Arab terrorist in Israel and Jerusalem. Now, these types of things, sometimes you can do something about them, sometimes you can't. But the point being is that certainly this is not something that a person can revolve their life around. And certainly don't send me your, please figure out my dream questions. I don't figure out people's dreams. It's not my thing. And I always tell people that generally speaking, most dreams are nonsensical, not because I don't care about them or I don't know about them or anything like that, just because simply that's what the Shlomo HaMelech says. That's what the Gemara says. Most people's dreams are completely nonsensical. Now, either way, a person needs to know that for your dreams to be of significant value and holiness, your real life has to be too. But if your life is full of perversion and heresy, then certainly the whatever that dream you have is usually going to be produced by the actions. Now, after hearing all of this, I didn't think it was going to take that much time, but it did. We already know that, obviously, some of this is very interesting, deep. There's a lot more to it we're not going to get into now. But already, all of us that are normal know that some of this stuff is completely beyond us. We're not there. We're not going to get there. Fine. Good. Why do we read this? Why do we need to know all this? Why do the sages spend so much time detailing the details of all of this in many, many other books? Because there are certain parts of it that are very, very relevant. Perhaps not the Yechidah or the Chaya, but the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama certainly are. Something that a person can attain with enough effort. Nefesh, everyone has. So long as you're alive, you have it. The Ruach and Neshama obviously require a lot more work. It requires a person exercising self-control, character development, eliminating that anger, eliminating all of those bad traits, also realizing that the bad traits also lead to physical impairments. The Gemara in Masechet Nedarim says that a person that is angry is ruining his body and will have a lot of suffering in his lower part of his body. And on him it's written the curse that Hashem will bring hemorrhoids to a person and all types of intestinal disease. The Shita Mekubetzet also teaches the same thing, where he says that a person that tends to be angry quickly is ruining and destroying his body, specifically the lower half of his body. If you have issues, instead of going to one doctor after another, the best solution that's foolproof is work on your character traits. Eliminate that anger from your life and, of course, other flaws. Now, this doesn't take overnight. You can't just eliminate it just because you want to eliminate it, but needless to say, there's work to do. But yet, at the same token, in the beginning of the lecture, we did say that there are some people that are already born with that neshama. Everyone has the nefesh. Some people succeed in elevating themselves to the ruach, but few get to the nefesh. Here the Ramban is saying that there are some people that already have it on day one. That's also what the Chazon Ish was saying. There are some unique people that are born with this neshama. A person that's angry can never attain this neshama. Why? They're ruining themselves both physically and spiritually. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat says that a person that tends to be angry is like an idol worshiper. Why? Because if he's angry all the time, he's following the Yetzer Hara all the time. If he's following the Yetzer Hara all the time, so today the Yetzer Hara says to him, yell at this one. Tomorrow the Yetzer Hara is going to tell him to throw this. The next day the Yetzer Hara is going to say, take this, break this. He's following the Yetzer Hara day after day. One day he's going to tell him, Yetzer Hara is going to tell him to go to church. So, in order to attain this neshama, a person has to obviously work very, very hard. But yet there are some people that already have it. And they have the character traits to match it, meaning that they don't tend to be angry. Instead, they tend to be very humble, very happy, very calm. Anxiety doesn't exist for them. Who are these people? Now, I could list a bunch of names to you, but that's not going to do anything for you. We've listed some of them already. Whether it's some of the children of Rav Ovadia, the Rav Kanievsky, alav shalom, his dear father, the Steipler Gaon, these very, very holy people. Yeah, but what does it have to do with you? What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with us? Can we get some? The answer is yes. The last time we had a shiur, number 16 of this series, the Ramban disclosed the secret of the time of union, the time of intimacy. There is a ideal time to be intimate on a daily basis, and an ideal of ideal time on a weekly basis, and the highest level of ideal for Torah scholars. On a regular basis, intimacy, which as we said earlier is called onah. It's a mitzvah of onah, or we'll call it intimacy to make it easy on the ear for everyone that's listening here in English. The mitzvah of intimacy, ideally, if it's on a weekly basis, during the week, it should be done after Chatzot. Chatzot is the middle of the night. There's anyone that has one of these applications on their phone or computers that tells you when Chatzot is in your location, because it changes. It's not always midnight. It could be in some places in the world, as late as 1 o'clock in the morning at different times of the year. Sometimes later, sometimes earlier. But either way, give or take, it's around that time frame. That's Chatzot. Intimacy during the week should be done after that. It should never be done during the day. It can be done at night before Chatzot, but if you want to reach a level of holiness, it should be done after Chatzot. And that's what the Zohar Kadosh says in Parashat Kedoshim, page 81a. It says, come see a person that desires to be holy in accordance with the will of the Creator. He should not use the daily Chatzot only for intimacy. As a Talmid Chacham's time to learn Torah is at that time, after Chatzot. Uniting the lower and upper worlds. But Shabbat Chatzot is ideal for Onah, for the Talmid Chacham. Why? So we see here that the Zohar tells us, first and foremost, Chatzot is the ideal time for the mitzvah between a man and his wife, for the average person out there. Now, there's a higher level of intimacy, which we learned last time, which is Shabbat, to be intimate on Shabbat. An even higher level of spiritual elevation is on Shabbat after Chatzot, meaning Friday night at midnight. So it's Shabbat, it's, middle of the night. That's the ideal time. And the highest level is for a person to only be intimate with his wife during the obligatory times, which is the night of the mikveh, if he, the day before he travels, or when he comes back from a trip. And that's Shabbat. Many Chachamim say that in this generation, even Talmidei Chachamim should be together with their wives at least twice a week. But the point being is that we see from here that Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, preserve themselves for this ideal time. Now, the average person could also preserve themselves, not necessarily for once a week, but they could do their private acts in the middle of the night during the week. That already elevates them, as the Zohar says. If they want to elevate even further, also do it on Shabbat. Of course, assuming that your wife is pure and you're allowed to be together and so on. It's not during the time that she's nida and so on. But again, there is another elevation for the intimate act to be on Shabbat. If you want to elevate it even further, on Shabbat after midnight. Now, for those Torah scholars, which is who the Ramban is talking to here, he says there is not only a reason and a purpose behind preserving yourself for that specific hour of Shabbat and only on that day, other than the times that you're obligated, but there's an extraordinary benefit to doing so. And the Ramban, for anyone who knows a little bit about him, Nachmanides, he was not only a commentator on the entire Torah. Any pasuk, any verse in the Torah that you read, you'll always find a Ramban discussing it. He was a dayan. He was a posek. Two are not necessarily always the same, meaning that a person can be a posek but not a dayan but not a posek. A dayan is one that gives rulings. A posek is one that establishes the rules based on the existing law. In addition, he was also a doctor. He also was a scholar of worldly knowledge. But one of the things that we discovered here in his teachings of the Iggeret HaKodesh is that the Ramban was one of the greatest Kabbalists that ever existed. He was a great Mekubal, which means that he knew the deeper source and meaning for every single act that a person can do and does in accordance to the Kabbalistic teachings of the Torah. And he is the one that's telling us here that the mitzvah of ona'ah for Talmidei Chachamim, for Torah scholars, should be from Shabbat to Shabbat, meaning only on Shabbat. And he writes as follows: the reason that it's from Shabbat night to Shabbat night is because the Shabbat is the foundation of the world. And similar to the world of souls, as it is written in Exodus chapter 20, verse 10, a Shabbat of Hashem, a Shabbat of the Lord. Now, this is what our sages referred to regarding the season of scholars, meaning the time for scholars being together, as being Shabbat night, so that their intention will be to the intellectual part of the soul, thereby bringing forth a form appropriate for the service of God, one which possesses an intellectual and superior pure soul. As they said in Exodus 31:17, on the seventh day he ceased from work and was refreshed. The word refreshed, some people translate it to rested. That word is vayinafash. Bayom HaShvi, Shabbat v'inafash, which comes from the source of the word Nefesh. Nefesh is soul. So to explain what I just said, the Ramban is saying so far that the reason why Shabbat is a unique time is because it's a unique day. Not because it's just a day that we rest. It's a day that Hashem obviously clearly shows He prefers, but rather that this Shabbat is the foundation of this world. And the Zohar Kadosh compares the Shabbat to the Tzadik. Just like it says in the Proverbs chapter 10 verse 25, Shlomo HaMelech says, Tzadik Yesod Olam, that the Tzadik, the righteous person, is the foundation of the world. The Zohar Kadosh also says that Shabbat is the source of the world. What does it mean, source of the world? That they give the spiritual strength for the world to continue existing. As the holy books explain, that while the world continues to accumulate more sins, more things, more acts that go against the Creator, which in essence negate their reason for existence. Because if you are operating against what's giving you source of life, you're in essence killing yourself, even if you don't realize it. A person can be drinking a cup of some liquid, and he may find it tasty. Now, little does he know that there's poison in this drink, And the more he drinks, the more likely that this poison is going to kill him. Now he drinks and he's happy. Wow, this is really good. It's like McDonald's Coca-Cola. And he drinks, and little by little he doesn't realize that his foot doesn't move anymore. And the next thing you know, the other foot doesn't move anymore. But he likes to drink so much, he keeps drinking. His leg doesn't move anymore. And other body parts start to fail. Now, if he's stupid, he's going to continue drinking. But if he wakes up, he realizes, okay, stop drinking is the first act. Second act is, how do I undo this? Hashem already had a built-in system to undo this. Because, of course, Hashem knows his creation. He knows that people are not going to do tshuva. They're not going to repent every week for all the sins that they did during that week. So Hashem created the Shabbat. And the Shabbat, along with the tzaddik, with the righteous people, their acts each week, in essence, revitalize the world. After the world accumulates a certain amount of sins that fill up the cup and fill up the cup and fill up the cup, Shabbat arrives, the acts, all the good deeds of the righteous people come and take it down and give us more room to breathe, more time. It doesn't eliminate the sins. Each one of those people is going to have to pay for those sins, unless they do tshuva. But we all of a sudden have more room. Imagine this is, let's say, for example, one cup. The cup was filled, is filled up to the top with sins. Now, Shabbat arrives, the good acts of the tzaddik arrive, and all of a sudden the cup becomes longer. So there's more room, there's more air in the cup now, separating the sins from the top, so it doesn't overflow. Now another week comes, and there's more sins come up. Shabbat comes up, the good deeds of the righteous come up, and the cup separates again even further. So this Shabbat is the source, the foundation of the world. And in fact, the Ramban then says to us that the reason why Hashem said Shabbat is for Hashem is because this is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took himself from the world of Asiyah, the world that we live in, to the highest levels of the world, the upper worlds. And with whoever observes the Shabbat also elevates themselves. And there are certain things that come from that. And the reason why the time for the scholars, for the Torah scholars, to be intimate with their wives is Shabbat night, is so that their intellectual soul, what we talked about in the Chazon Ish lecture last night or 2 nights ago, will be elevated during the act and now have the ability to produce something that they cannot produce at any other time. An intellectual, superior, and pure soul. A new soul. What does it mean, a new soul? Everyone knows, or at least if they're not a beginner, that all of Am Yisrael, all of mankind came from Adam HaRishon. All of the original souls were at Adam HaRishon. Now, Adam HaRishon reproduced, Cain killed Abel, then he had Shet, and so on. The world reproduced, populated, got to the generation of Noach. They became horrific, despite getting a perfect world, perfect weather, perfect sustenance, perfect everything. Instead of serving Hashem, they started doing everything the opposite. Hashem saw that the sins of mankind got so great that they lost the right to live, he destroyed the world and only left Noach and his family. So now, the world had to restart from Noach and his sons and their wives. The world repopulated again. Eventually we had Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. That's where Judaism begins. And the seed of Avraham begins the nation of Israel. Judaism officially begins as a religion on Mount Sinai, where at Mount Sinai, all of the souls of the Jewish people are present there. And the Zohar HaKadosh says even the souls of the converts were there. These converts came from a spiritual end. Physical end, we know there's certain converts that were bad converts, there's certain converts that will come later on, but we're talking about the spiritual end of it. They came from the seed of Avraham also. During all of those years that Avraham was together with Sarah, but they were not able to produce a child. All of the holy acts of Avraham still produced holiness, and all of the righteous souls turn out to be the converts that are still coming to this world to this day. Hence the reason why someone that converts today calls themselves the son or daughter of Avraham, son or daughter of Sarah, because you really are from the seed of Avraham and Sarah. So now, all of those souls are in Mount Sinai. Now, those souls, many of them sinned. And because of that, they had to reincarnate and come back into the world to fix what they didn't achieve the first time, unless they ruined themselves enough, like Korach and Datan Aviram and others, that they lost their share of the world to come and they're in Gehenom forever. Others were able to reincarnate, go into a Gilgul after a certain type of punishment, whether it be Gehenom, Kafakela, and so on. Hashem brought them back in the world and gave them another chance. The overwhelming majority of people in the world today, and by overwhelming majority I mean 99.9999% of people in the world today, are reincarnations of people that lived in previous generations, both Jewish and non-Jewish people. Which means that the person that was already here multiple times, that obviously is returning because they're making certain mistakes, certain sins, not big enough to destroy their neshama forever, but not small enough where they're eliminated in hell. They have to come back here. Now, but that means that soul is not new. It's a old punished soul. That's what Rabbi Chaim Vital calls it. And that soul is coming with those same natures that it had in the previous life. Meaning, if it was angry, if it was stingy, if it was arrogant, if it was lazy, whatever it was in a previous life, that's what it is here. Again. And the job, the goal, the purpose is to overcome all of that and elevate itself so it doesn't have to come back here again. So each one of the people that's born into the world today, and all of you see that this kid, even though his brother, his twin brother, looks exactly just like him, his brother is really generous and he's really stingy. His brother is really, humble, and he is like the most arrogant person in the world. And so on and so forth. And you see this in kids. You see that they can literally be born out of the same seed, but yet have completely different personalities, completely different natures. Needless to say, different age groups and different families. But the point being is that when you are bringing a child to the world, generally speaking, you're bringing an old soul back into the world. Now, as a side note, Rabbi Yehuda writes in Minchat Yehuda, never name your children after wicked people. Because when you name your kids after wicked people, you're increasing the likelihood that your child will actually be the soul of that wicked person. Which is actually what happened to Rabbi Yehuda himself and a few other family members, where he writes this really heartbreaking experience that happened to him. There was a certain wicked person in the family that died one year, and as a form of honor for the family, anyone that had a child that year named it after this person. Rabbi Yehuda says, every one of those babies died at the Brit Milah. Every one of them. And after he saw his own kid die, he had all questions, and he saw this is obviously not just a happenstance. He had a dream with this wicked person, family member, came to him in a dream. And he saw in a dream of how this wicked person entered the body of one of the babies. And because he was wicked and deserved a death penalty for some act that he did while he was alive, the death penalty was given on the baby. So when this wicked person came back to Rabbi Yehuda in a dream a year later, asking him to name his upcoming baby after him also, Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll never do it, and I'll make sure that no one ever does it. And of course, there was a argument between the two, but of course, Rabbi Yehuda writes a specific warning: never name your children after wicked people. And wicked according to the Torah, not according to your logic or your family preference or other things. According to the Torah. Meaning, if you have a family member that did not observe Torah and mitzvot, don't name anybody after him. If you have a family member that is not Torah observant, does not follow God, a person that's an atheist, a person that's an idol worshiper, a person that's an immoral, adulterer, thief, people like that, never name your kids after those people. Why? Because that person, he may have to be reincarnated, and if you're naming after him, you're making that body, in essence, a perfect vessel for him. And whatever punishment that person is supposed to get could be a Shem Yishmo. And you're just bringing a heartache to your life. I know many people have this tradition of naming their kids after people that die without any care in the world of whether this person that died in their family is a righteous person or not. There's a very big mistake. Now, moving back on to what we're talking about in regards to these special souls versus these punished souls, which is the majority of the world, the Ramban is telling us here is that, sure, if you are going to be intimate in an elevated, holy way during the week, you're going to bring one of these souls. And it may not necessarily be the worst person in the world. It may be just a person that has to fix one thing, 5 things, 100 things, but it doesn't mean that this is a wicked soul. It just means that this soul was not good enough to remain in heaven, to be in heaven. It had to come back to this world. Which means it is also coming with its own baggage, its own predisposition, its own flaws that it had in the previous life. If in a previous life it had all types of devious thought processes, all types of deluded mindsets, desires, and things of that nature, then it's coming to the world with the same thing. That could make the parent's life very difficult, to say at the least. If you want to avoid that and bring what's called a new soul, new, brand new out of the box, be one of those 0.01%, part of that microcosm that brings those brand new souls meaning they're highly elevated, holy souls. They're souls that are already superior to everybody else at birth. Have a purity level that's in line with the very righteous. Intellectual abilities that are above and beyond the norm. The Ramban says, this is why the time for Torah scholars is Shabbat. Because since Shabbat is the foundation of the world, and since the Tzaddik is also the foundation of the world, and since Hashem himself said that on the seventh day he ceased from work, Vayinafash. Vayinafash comes from the word Nefesh. He says, you want to get that Nefesh, that third highest level? Shabbat, after Chatzot, that's the time to get it. That's the time to get the new souls. If you want to pull down the holiest souls possible from the heavenly roots, the only time to do so is Shabbat after Chatzot. That's when it's time to do it. Meaning that there's not only just great, good, wonderful, that day. No. If a person achieves what they want to achieve on Shabbat, they could literally bring into the world the next Gadol HaDor. Even if they themselves are not a Gadol HaDor. They could bring into the world a very, very special, brand new soul that doesn't come with a baggage of problems, a baggage of sins, a baggage of horrible traits, or even just a few. You're bringing somebody unique. And all of those stories that some of us have heard about the great sages while they were children, of how they knew the entire Torah by the time they were 6, and how they wrote already books by the time they were 9 or 8, and how all these amazing things, that's because they were born special souls. Not all of them, but many of them were born special high-level souls. So the Ramban says, this is the intention concerning the season for scholars, meaning the time for intimacy for scholars. Understand this well. Now, anytime somebody makes a point, but yet after he makes the point, he adds a few extra words, says, understand this well. Aven meod. Well, you already explained it. Why are you saying understand this well? The Ramban is saying, delve into what I just taught you even further on your own, and you'll actually even understand further than what I explained. There are certain things that you yourself are expected to understand on your own if you delve into it even deeper. They did not select the days of physicality, that being the weekdays, the days of material activity, but rather the Shabbat, which is totally spiritual and is the world of souls. Understand this, and it will be good for you. Here the Ramban again repeats the same thing, but elaborates further. And he tells us, the sages taught us that intimacy certainly is something that can elevate a person to a higher level. The highest level of serving HaKodesh Baruch Hu could be attained through the intimacy, if done the right way at the right time. If someone is an average person, certainly they can elevate themselves to a certain point by simply choosing not to be an animal and do it in public, not to be an animal and do it with someone that's not their wife or husband, not to be an animal and do it in a very provocative, horrible way. Certainly everybody understands this. They can elevate themselves even further by doing it at a specific time during the week. And they can elevate themselves even further by doing it also on Shabbat. But if they are a Torah scholar or they have the ambition of becoming a Torah scholar, then certainly they can learn a lot more from this, where they can say that there's a additional benefit from this self-preservation. A benefit unlike any other. Something no other part of the Torah offers. At least not that I'm familiar with. No one tells you if you observe Shabbat, your kid could be a brand new soul. Certainly there are certain zgulot and certain things you can do to have righteous kids, to have kids that are Talmidei Chachamim. If you give kavod to Chachamim, if you sponsor a lot of Torah and you make Torah your number one investment in your life, and you invest into Chachamim and so on, certainly you merit to have Chachamim as kids. But again, a Gadol HaDor, a brand new Neshama, this is the only thing I've ever heard of that does it. If you find something else, please let me know. But here the Ramban uncovers an extraordinary secret. A secret that literally anybody can do if they want it bad enough. He says that this special season, this special time for the Torah scholars was specifically chosen to be Shabbat and not the weekday. Because the weekday is the time of physicality, whereas Shabbat is spirituality. Shabbat is the foundation of the world. Shabbat is the time where HaKodesh Baruch Hu elevates himself to the highest level. Shabbat is the time where you have an open door policy for these special souls that come down into this world, that are brand new souls that no other time of the year or week has the ability to get it. And the more you delve into this, the more it will be good for you, he says. Now, of course, this is only relevant to preserve yourself for only once a week, and other times that are obligated is only relevant if the person's mind is clean. If he's watching pornography or looking at all types of perversions throughout the whole week, he's just not intimate with his wife the whole week, this is not going to work. And in fact, even if he's constantly lusting after his own wife, which could cause him to waste seed, intentionally or unintentionally, also this is not the right fit. He's not at the level to do this yet. You can't just decide tomorrow to do all of this. The point is to realize that the Torah is not something you acquire in one step, but it's certainly something that you could acquire more and more of over time, and the benefits gradually increase. And the Zohar HaKadosh that told us in Parashat Kedoshim, come see the person that desires to be holy in accordance to the will of the Creator, of how he should not use the daily chatzot, the time of chatzot, only for intimacy, because if he's a Torah scholar, he should use that time to learn Torah and preserve himself for Shabbat. Why would I preserve myself for Shabbat? Says the Zohar HaKadosh, because that's the time to bring those new neshamot. Those are the few words I didn't add before. Why do the Torah scholars wait for that Shabbat? Why do I need to preserve myself? Okay, it's great learning Torah the whole week. Fine, fantastic, but what do I get out of it? Not that you're supposed to do something for Hashem because you get something out of it, but that's, again, what do I get out of it? Zohar HaKadosh says, that Friday night, that's when the new souls come. If you're there, this new soul's going to come. You're going to get one of those new souls. You're going to bring it to the world. You're going to have a special neshama come into your life that's literally going to light the world up. Rabbi Chaim Vital, the Talmid Muvak of the Arizal, comments on this and says, these new neshamot come down to this world on Shabbat Eve, and if one was intimate and impregnated his wife on that night, I am sure that that new soul, that new neshama, will settle upon that seed. And since it's a new soul, rather than a punished soul that needs a reincarnation, that needs a gilgul, on them it said, they will be holy, Hasidim boys, that come down on Shabbat Eve. He says, who are these souls? These are the holy Tzadikim, these are the holy Hasidim. Not Hasidim like we know today. These are, meaning Hasidim, people that are extraordinarily righteous, above and beyond the norm. Even the norm of the righteous. Rabbi Chaim Vital says, for those that preserve themselves, there's a reward in this world for that. Now the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, comments on Masechet Bava Kama, in the seventh chapter, the 19th section, regarding intimacy on Shabbat. And he says as a hint about the advantages of having for the Jewish people to have intimacy on Shabbat. In the verse, V'shamru bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, that Am Yisrael observed the Shabbat, he says, if you notice, bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, the first letter, bnei Israel, the first letter, bnei is bet, Israel is yud, et is aleph, Shabbat is hey. They spell biyah, intimacy. Meaning that if you will preserve your intimacy to be on Shabbat, you'll get that new Neshama. In the Sefer Pri Etz Chaim, in Shar Kriyat Shema, Al Hamita, in Perek Yud Aleph 11, Rabbi Chaim Vital says that he learned from the Arizal something very critical that we haven't mentioned until now. That the Arizal taught him that this whole thing of preserving yourself only for Shabbat, as far as intimacy preservation, is only if a person is trying to bring a new child to the world. Because it's not relevant for a woman that's already pregnant or a woman that's nursing and cannot get pregnant at this time. So it won't affect her. She's not going to get a brand new soul if she's already pregnant or she just had a baby and not able and so on. So there's no need to do this only once a week if it's not possible for her to get pregnant. But the Ben Ish Chai comments on this, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and he says, although you can certainly rely on what Rabbi Chaim Vital said that he learned from the Arizal, and you don't have to preserve yourself for only Shabbat if you're a Torah scholar, if your wife can't get pregnant. There is still a benefit in doing it, says the Ben Ish Chai, because of the spiritual level that is generated at that time. Even if your wife cannot get pregnant. Because, of course, as we know, Avraham Avinu wasn't able to impregnate his wife for all of those years. But yet all of those souls that were created ended up being the holy souls of the converts. So we see from here that a person can make the same amount of effort, as Rav Ephraim says, same effort, and get one of two sacks. Same effort, and get a sack full of gold and diamonds. Or same effort, and get a sack of sand. Same effort, same relationship, same act. Which one do you want? Now, yes, you're going to say, no, it's not really the same effort. Here, I'm doing this, and this. And over there, I'm barely doing this. Yes, you're right. But at the end of the day, it's the same effort. And a person shouldn't jump from 0 to 100% overnight without obviously having their spouse agree and their spouse go along with them. Even in regards to the timing. There was somebody that told me just recently that their spouse was happy about everything else in regards to what's being taught, except that after Chatzot being the ideal time. Why? Because they wake up really early in the morning, they want to go pray, and if they are together after the middle of the night, it screws up their schedule. Okay. If it's so difficult to be after Chatzot on Shabbat, at the very least, still do it on Shabbat at night. Doesn't have to be after Chatzot. Now, don't expect the highest level of success and reward and so on for something that's not quite the highest level, but it's certainly better than nothing. It's certainly better than the rest of the week. And sometimes that's what we have to realize, that We can't just jump for the top prize on day one. We're not ready for it yet. We can't just go from, a Nefesh to a Neshama in one day. But that doesn't mean that you should just completely ignore it because it's not attainable for you now. Because anyone that's acquired anything of value in their life, anyone that has achieved anything of value in their life, knows that it takes time to acquire anything that's valuable. Needless to say, something that is valuable forever. It takes time. It doesn't take one effort. It doesn't take one opportunity. It takes time and a lot of preparation. So if the only thing you can do right now is make the exception of only being together after Chatzot during the week, that's a great start. Maybe one day you'll be able to also on Shabbat after Chatzot. And little by little, a person can gradually increase. But for some people, none of this is relevant. Because they are in the place of what we talked about in the very early part of this shiur. They're still dealing with a perverted mind. They're still dealing with wasting seed and watching pornography and people coming out of the closet or dying in the closet and all types of other craziness. Well, you can still learn from this. You can learn from this, number one, that mindset that you had that's causing you to sin or desiring to sin, it's not a new thing. It's the reason why you're in this world in the first place, to overcome those desires. You're not a new soul. You're one of the souls that reincarnated because you screwed up in the past. And guess what? If you don't fix yourself, you're not going to heaven. You may end up having to come back here again. But if you run out of time and the Mashiach comes before that, there is no coming back again. The outcome is much worse. The reason why you're having these difficulties is because of the actions that you're doing. And the reason why you came to this world is because of those very same things. And it's not the fault of your parents. It's not even the fault of your upbringing. It's what you did to yourself in the previous life. But what you could also fix in your current life. Never lose hope. Never give up. Everyone can get better. Don't believe the people that tell you, you're a sinner. Everyone's a sinner. You can't fix yourself. It's society's fault. It's your parents' fault. It's the media's fault. No. It's your fault. You are a creation of God. You can overcome the obstacles that God put in front of you. Because God is not going to put an obstacle in front of you that you cannot overcome. It defeats the purpose. If He wants to punish you, this world is not designed for punishment. This world is designed for tests. Punishment, there are other places for that. Gehenom, Kafakela, Chibuta Kevel, other specially designated places for punishment. He's not bringing you to this world to punish you. You're here to be tested. You pass the test, you get to a bigger level. You pass a level, collect $200 at the start. But, all kidding aside, don't believe the Louis Farrakhan's of the world that tell their members, their followers, their victims, it's the media's fault. It's the leadership's fault. It's the Jewish people's fault. It's so-and-so's fault that you are sinners, that you are perverted, that you are criminals, that you are this, that you are that. No. It's your fault. You did this to you. And you can fix you. Don't victimize yourself and don't let anybody victimize you. You are a creation of God that can elevate itself to the highest possible levels of prophecy. As Eliyahu Hanavi himself says in Tana Devei Eliyahu, the very same person, the very same prophet that we learn today is one of the few people that never died, that got to the highest level of soul. He himself said that whether man or woman, young or old, Jew or Gentile, everyone can elevate their soul to the level of attaining Ruach HaKodesh and even prophecy if their actions were appropriate in accordance to what they want to attain. Meaning that regardless of how many of your hands are tied behind your back when you were born into a bad neighborhood, into the projects, and you're this and you're that, all of those excuses are not going to help you at the Beit Din of heaven. You can't go up to Shema and say, listen, God, I know I was a gangster and I sold some dope on the side and I murdered a couple of people, but come on. I live there. What can I do? What can you do? Elevate yourself like many others before you did. Yeah, but Louis Farrakhan told me that, it's the media's fault and the Jewish people's fault and the Hollywood's fault. And guess what? It's none of their fault. If anybody's fault, it's Farrakhan's fault. It's leaders like him's fault that are literally turning you into a victim that believes that he is never going to change because he's incapable of changing, and they have literally diagnosed you with a disease that's incurable because it doesn't exist, but you believe that it exists, and you believe that it's incurable, and you believe that everyone has to suffer the consequence because of that. Anyone that tells you you were born this way, you cannot change, is no different than an atheist that's telling you that everything came from nothing. Because God didn't put you in this world to stay the same. He put you in this world and even made sure that you watch this segment of the lecture to remind you that He created you with an ability to elevate yourself to much greater levels than you can possibly imagine yourself today. Now, it's not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be like a draft pick to major sports where one day you become rich. No. It's more like a career that starts in the mailroom, making minimum wage or less, and little by little, doing your job right, showing up early, leaving late, putting the effort, making the sacrifices, and building yourself in a spiritual aspect in your servitude of God, eliminating all of the deterrents, eliminating all of the degenerates, eliminate all of the lies and the liars, eliminating all of the things that are holding back from getting you a smoother road to a higher level of spirituality and connection with the one and only God and His truth of Torah. And year after year, you will find yourself higher than you were the year before. With enough patience and dedication, you can achieve something very special. And even more, you can have a family of very special people. And even more, you could have descendants that are very, very special people. All with one common belief, aside from the Torah, the one true God, but the common belief that you can do more no matter where you started, no matter what your color is, no matter what people say or think, and no matter what your predisposition and inclinations are, even if you have the worst inclinations and desires in the world, you can elevate yourself. You could elevate yourself to such a point where one day you could be considered one of the holiest people in the generation, one of the Torah scholars, the Gadolie HaDor, the leaders of the generations, the top servants of God. And guess what? That'll be something. Yehi Ratzon that the people that are watching this will at the very least believe that they can do it. And Be'ezrat Hashem, they'll have success if they do it. Kol Tuv, B'cha B'atzlacha. Be'ezrat Hashem will speak tomorrow. Different shiur, different topics. Anyone that wants to support all of the things that we do at the organization, you can go to bhtorah.org or be'ezrathashem.org, or you could donate on YouTube, Facebook, and all of the other wonderful places, or more important than everything else, share these lectures because they could certainly help more people. Thank you very much for learning with me. May Hashem bless each and every single one of you.